Hey, it's Deep Focus. I'm your host, Mitch Goldman. May 26th, 2025. Uri Caine in the studio with me. We're talking about Corea and Herbie Hancock at the piano, face to face, side by side occasionally. This is part 2 of 3. And man, when Uri was coming up, which is around when I was coming up, these two guys were the dudes. And what an experience to hear them just responding to each other. All right, let's get into it. If you didn't hear part 1, you might want to go check that out. Otherwise, come on along. I'm not even going to try to describe it. You were
I think they're touching on a lot of the bases that, we're talking about. It's the beautiful thing about coming from a tradition and then bringing your own thing to it and then going back to the tradition and sort of repurposing it and showing that it's not a thing about whether things are old-fashioned or new-fashioned. It's really just different ways of having the music flow. And both of them are so good at sort of anticipating what the next person might want to do and setting them up, which is not so easy to do when you're playing music with other people. You know what I mean? You really have to have, you sort of have your own idea of what you want to happen and your own style that is partially your thing and partially just what it is, what you find yourself playing. And, but you can hear them sort of really trying to egg each other on and press each other. But then other times, one of them will walk the bass so that the other person can sort of take a conventional solo. But then as soon as that sort of goes on for a while, something happens that breaks it up. And I love that moment when I think they're sort of in the beginning trading sort of over the vamp before they even get into the actual melody of Liza. And Chick just plays something that Herbie, you would expect him to respond to it, and there's silence. And then the audience laughs because I'm sure, he's like, what am I supposed to play after that? But then he does. But it's also a sign of respect. It's like, wow, okay, you got me there, but now I'm going to come back. And you hear that a lot in this recording. It really made me think about it when I was listening to it, that it's not that they were trying to imitate each other, but on some level they were allowing themselves to be influenced, which is really something natural that happens when you're playing. If you're playing in a group, you find yourself sort of gravitating toward what's going on, especially if there's other musicians there that are playing in a certain way. Or you stand your ground in the sense that you're like, I'm going to keep on playing my way to be the contrast to this other person. And yet they're so flexible, they can do both. It's like sometimes you can't tell who is who. Sometimes you can totally tell who is who. Sometimes they decide, okay, I'll be the minimal one, you go for it, and then I'm going to give you, we'll reciprocate. And again, it's like human relationships or human conversations. You go with the flow, but it doesn't mean that you have to be passive all the time. You're actually thinking ahead too, like, okay, how do I get into there? And then let me, deal with the response. And, like I love it, for instance, I know this sounds like a technical, they don't play the melody at the end, which is sort of the conventional thing that you do when you take a tune out, you play it so people realize, okay, the improvisation's over. They're sort of vibing off the crowd that loves it, and they're spontaneously applauding, which is not an unheard of thing to happen. But when it does happen, if you're playing, you realize, okay, maybe that's it. We don't really need to be formal about this. We've done our thing. Now let's get out of it. And so that type of freedom, even in something like that, they use the tradition, but it's not conventional.
Yeah. And maybe it's funny because you and I were talking off mic, like, gee, someday my prince will come. That's kind of corny, like a little bit. And then maybe they're saying like, yeah, but.
I think, Miles recorded that, and he was known for taking songs that maybe you would think you wouldn't do. And then by bringing in, just the way he phrases the melody, it becomes very poignant. And, on that record, when Miles did it, he had Hank Mobley take a solo, which was very lyric and simple and beautiful. And then he plays again, and then he brings Coltrane in. And Coltrane does his thing. And so, again, you're getting these different views of how to play the song. You can play it tenderly and simply. You can let the soloist try to extend that idea. And then you can have somebody that come in and just completely dominate it in some way. And it all works. It's really a beautiful thing about music that those, you can really bring your personality to bear on it, and your different personalities, even if, you have one sort of personality, but in the sense that you cultivate these different ways, these different rhetorical things, the different moods that you have that you bring to every night that you're playing, let's say, and put that out there and just let it be that way. And that's what I love about the spontaneity, but it's backed up by so much, I don't want to say study, but it's a love of the tradition. They knew about ragtime. They knew about James P. Johnson. They knew about Bud Powell. They knew about Monk. They wanted to quote it. They wanted to show that they're part of this lineage. And then they say, you know what, forget all that stuff. We're just going to play the way we want to play. So you get both of those things. It's beautiful.
Something just popped into my head that I hadn't thought about in a while. I don't know if you have, and let me preface this by saying you could hit the pass button. We can come back to it later or not, but I'm remembering, 25 years ago or so, locking you in a room with Chick Corea. And I'm wondering if anything from that experience you would pull into this discussion.
You're talking about the interview
for
the Knitting Factory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, for me, it was a strange experience because I was sort of idol worshiping. But the thing that I remember was that when I first moved to New York, I sublet the building that he and Dave Holland and Dave Liebman and Brecker and Bobby Malik, which is, all those guys were from Philly. He would let me stay in his apartment when he was touring in the summer in Europe.
Wow.
And so it was on West 19th Street.
Wow.
And I'm sure it's totally gentrified now, but back then it wasn't. And so as soon as I mentioned that building, all this memory came flooding back to him. And he really talked a lot about that because it was one of those things where it was almost like he missed those days of when he was first in New York, and just the spirit of, having these all night jam sessions and that's how he met all the musicians. And I think a lot of musicians, everybody has a different experience if they've been living in New York for a long time, but when they first come there and who they meet and where the places that they meet and the clubs and what's going on. So I didn't really have to ask too many questions. But I had already started playing a little bit with Barry Altschul. So I knew that Barry would talk to me about the days of Circle and how the dynamics of that group was working out. But he's very open, and he talked about Scientology and how he felt that Scientology was being unfairly demonized, and that there was a controversy back then whether Scientology could even be considered a legitimate religion to be tax exempt.
Right.
And I remember he told me that he felt that he was being persecuted in Germany because Germany, unlike the United States, didn't consider it a religion. They said it's whatever it is, we're not going to respect it or deal with it that way. So, there was that aspect to it too. But just in terms of asking how he moved from being somebody who was a brilliant pianist and then his road, because he played with a lot of people. He was a sideman with a lot of people. And his early records, when you hear him with the variety of people he was playing, I could relate to that because in a way that's what a lot of young musicians that come, you basically start playing with other people as a sideman and you start building experiences. And especially as a pianist, if you're playing with people that are playing older styles, newer styles, you're adapting. And that's what he was about. He was saying, I play with Mongo Santa Maria. I had to deal with that. Then started to play more with Roy Haynes and those guys, and that was another thing. So it was very inspirational in the sense that, you could see how he built himself. He was very open to a lot of different musical experiences. And he also was really into, in a way, classical music. I mean, you can tell from his technique that he had studied it. And also Herbie did too. Yeah. I mean, Herbie was, he was playing with the Chicago Symphony when he was 7 years old. And that's always been an interesting thing too, because, I remember, for myself, when I was first started playing music, it was, with a classical piano teacher. Then I met a French pianist who lived in Philadelphia named Bernard Piffer. You should do a show about him because it was amazing. He sort of was like the Art Tatum of France, escaped the Nazis, came to United States in the 50s, sort of made a splash, but then was sort of forgotten and moved to Philly to become a teacher. And he taught a lot of people. But I met him when I was about 12, and I was like, I'm tired of classical music. I don't want to have to practice that. He said, no, you're wrong. You should practice it because it's not only for the technique. You should be able to hear all the chords and all this music. Could you hear all, like, what Beethoven is doing here or what Chopin is doing? That you should be able to hear that. And then it's a way to work on your touch and your phrasing. And in that sense, it influenced me, at least to take it seriously enough, not to think that I would become a classical pianist so much, but just to say, no, you can learn from this music. And then you start to realize you can learn from many musics, when you start to listen to how people are playing and the vibe in the group and the dynamics between, it's endlessly fascinating. So to me, it was like, it opened up that world. And then I started to see a lot of people are really on that tip, that they're always trying to dig deeper. And again, using that idea that the tradition is not a visor, something that's limiting you. It's something that you can dive into as you love and then take from it what you want and shape it that way. And it's constantly there. You can constantly move away from it, go towards it, forget about it if you don't want to deal with it. And I hear that all the time when I hear these guys play.
Yeah. We're listening to this duet performance, Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock. The show's deep focus, and if you're a regular listener, what we do, we invite the guest chooses the topic, and we find these magical moments in the WKCR archives. And right now we're in Montreux Jazz Festival, July 1979. And Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock just illustrated. Yeah, it really is quite phenomenal thinking. These two guys come together, and it's one of those things. I don't know who came up with this idea originally, but when you hear the two of them, it just makes so much sense. They're roughly contemporaries. They have this deep shared history, but I'm trying to remember. I don't think they did a ton of work with Miles at the same time, and I'm trying to think when else they would have come together other than maybe being in overlapping scenes. But
they were in New York at the same time. Yeah, they were on, I think, some of the Miles gigs where he might have even had 3 or 4 keyboard players.
Yeah, not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot of Herbie and.
But obviously
Chick.
They knew each other. But think about, like, as a thought experiment, what would a duo, let's say, with Keith Jarrett and McCoy Tyner be? Yeah. How would that have worked? Or how would it have been, let's say, with Chick and McCoy? Yeah. And so on some level, you might think, one of them would have to play to the other's strengths. Or not. Maybe not. Maybe because it's always surprising. People think of, let's say, just to take that example of McCoy Tyner, who was very important in Philadelphia. Because, but
among other places,
of course. But in terms of growing up there and that ghost of, like, people they knew where his mother's hairdress shop was. And they said, that's where McCoy grew up. And that if you listen to a lot of the early records, his touch was a lot different. When he's playing trio, he plays a trio with Roy Haynes and with other players where it's not, let's say, the the later McCoy. And so that's another style of his playing. Or even if you hear early Keith Jarrett, and he's sort of, he's playing with Art Blakey.
Yeah.
So he's having a different, it's different than the way that people, let's say by this point in history, in music history, knew about how he was playing. Or even taking, I don't know, it's just, what would Oscar Peterson have sounded like if he had played with Cecil Taylor? I remember I went to see Mary Lou Williams play with Cecil Taylor.
Oh, yeah, that was
in New York.
Kind of notorious,
we came up
right?
to hear that. And, in a way, it was interesting because it was a different dynamic. It wasn't that they were trying to complement each other. On some level, it looked like almost that they had rehearsed something, but then when it came time for the gig, Cecil was playing his way and Mary Lou got a little frustrated. And then he relented and he let her play her way and he would play. But it wasn't this, it was different. Only because it's like in life. I mean, even people that are dealing with each other, sometimes one person has to give the other person the room to be themselves, just out of respect. And that was the impression I got from that concert, that Cecil knew that he could play the way he played and dominate. And then at some point he said, I have to show respect to Mary Lou Williams because her style was encompassing many things. But the thing that was so fascinating was she was trying to play like Cecil in a certain way and showing, no, I can play this way too. I'm coming from where I'm coming from, but don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to match you. And so, okay, that was the dynamic of that concert, where it doesn't always necessarily work out. It wasn't as, tight, let's say, as the way Herbie and Chick are playing, but it's also a real, I guess, marriage in a way of these two styles. And it's just so interesting to hear how that is, because a lot of times musicians don't want to do that. They want to present something that is of a piece. And of course, there's a reason you do that, because it creates a mood. But then other times, and this happens in real life, you're on the road and somebody starts having, the style sort of changes and it affects everyone else, either in a good way or a bad way, because people are saying, you shouldn't play that way. And of course, you can't say that to somebody, to say you shouldn't. No, I play the way I want to play. And then the group either adapts to it or they try to resist it. And in many cases, in both ways, it's very fascinating. Because it can work. It can work. A lot of music is based on that tension between it, but a lot of music obviously isn't.
Well, it's also, there's a world of difference between two guitar players getting together on stage or two drummers compared to two piano players. Because a piano it's a universe unto itself. I mean, you could say that about other instruments too, but pianists have an opportunity to build that whole world. Right. Even if they're not playing any electronics, just on the piano itself.
I mean, I think one element of that is also that, and this is, you hear this from people that don't want piano in the group.
Right.
Because the piano immediately establishes harmony.
Yeah.
And so that, for some players, is very restrictive. It's like, do not force me to have to play the chord that you're playing with. I mean, when you listen to this, you see how they solve that problem. Because if you play a standard where there's sort of a agreed to harmony, okay. But the substitutions, the harmonic substitutions, the clever things that they do, that's obviously wasn't what George Gershwin wrote, but it works. They both knew that as pianists. Oh, you're doing that thing. Okay, I'm with you. And there's a lot of confidence about the harmony and it's interesting when you're in a group like that, sometimes you restrict yourself as a pianist not to be that domineering. If the horn player says, you can lay out, you can you don't have to play all the time. And that's, I think, it leads to another type of freedom. So you restrict yourself in order to let the group flourish.
Well, what we're hearing here, Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock, huge amount of mutual respect and
absolutely
love and all that. It's really coming through here. Should we go back to the music?
Sure.
Yes. So it's WKCR What a pleasure being in the studio with Uri Caine and getting rich insights into the piano and history and these two musicians playing together, which had this, if you missed it in the beginning, well, you're going to want to hear it on the podcast later, but I'll short shrift tell you that Uri had this chance to see and hear this performance in Philadelphia as an emerging musician. And still, it stayed with you, very obviously. It's so the show is Deep Focus. I'm your host, Mitch Goldman, and we are going back to Montreux, 1979. And I'm going to let, I think the next thing you'll hear is from Herbie Hancock. He's got a little something to say, more ways than one. It's Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea on WKCR.
Hey, Chick. How you doing, man? I'm doing great. How you doing? Great. Did you hear the first part of the show? It's unbelievable. I'm telling you, all these piano players. I had a great time. I was sitting right up there, and I had the most enjoyable time that I've had for years. Yeah, really. But it's because I'm a piano player, and I was brought up listening to these guys, and it was a real thrill to hear them all.
Mr. Hancock, could you please explain to me how this very sophisticated music you play has been influenced by other piano players?
Say what? Hey, I like the way you talk like that, man. I thought you did. Yeah. Now this is a serious part of our concert, crazy. Ladies and gentlemen. He's crazy. Poo. What? So I said a French word. I slipped it. Actually, really, now you're going to get a real rare treat. Audiences don't usually get a chance to hear Herbie Hancock spin out an improvisation solo in front of them. And I get a chance to hear it every night, and so I'm very fortunate. So treat your spirit, mind, and body to Herbie Hancock. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. I hope that didn't make you too sleepy. I'm kind of tired myself. Now, it gives me great pleasure to share with you an opportunity that we all must really cherish, and that is to hear the incredible creative life force that comes from the music of Chick Corea. Chick Corea. Well, the good rhythm.
I think the word delirious might not be inappropriate. We are in Montreux, Switzerland. That was, well, you just heard Chick Corea doing a solo exploration on the piano, and before that, Herbie Hancock. And if you're just joining us, this is the show's called Deep Focus. I'm your host, Mitch Goldman, here with Uri Caine. And what we do when we do what we do on the show, we invite the guest chooses a topic, we plunge into the WKCR archives and see if we can find a representative recording. And holy smokes, man, it's working.
Glad this stuff exists, because I didn't know about it before you mailed it to me.
Well, our guest, Uri, chose this experience that you had as a young person, a young emerging pianist, of hearing these two giants, Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock, do this duet performance. That was part of a tour and recording that came out. This is, I imagine that people our age and older who play piano are like, well, yeah, of course. Yeah, the Herbie Chick duets thing, sure. And people who are younger like going, what?
Right.
That happened?
Right.
And that happened. And it's happening right now here in the studio. This early in the show, we heard some from Japan, but it was nowhere near what is happening on stage now. And since our last break there, Uri, what took place? What unfolded on that stage?
I mean, I think as we've been talking about, because both of them have a deep love of the tradition and a lot of experiences playing with a lot of different types of music. I think both of them really had extensive sideman experience before they sort of emerged as their own personalities, which not every musician does that. Some people just sort of do their thing the whole time, but you could hear that in their playing.
There's a great Deep Focus that we did. Roy Nathanson was here,
okay,
and he chose Eric Dolphy. And we had a recording from a joint in Queens, just a neighborhood spot, 1962. And who's playing piano? It's Herbie.
Wow.
And it's just,
Herbie played with Eric Dolphy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's recognizably Herbie, but yeah, he's just,
Yeah, because my understanding was that especially Donald Byrd brought him to New York. And Donald Byrd was sort of his advocate. Not that he needed an advocate, but I mean, that was the first gig that established him. But as soon as he got to New York, even before he joined Miles, he was already sort of playing with all these different people. And, it's like I said before, the piano is bass, drums, all those instruments. When you're part of a rhythm section playing, especially for horn players, you have to learn how to adapt to what's happening. One night it could be Eric Dolphy, but the next night it could be Stan Getz. And so that idea of sort of trying to understand, what is demanded of you in that situation and how you can make your own personal thing when you get your chance to shine, even in that context. It both makes you think about all the different ways of playing music, but it gives you a certain confidence that you can react. And if you find yourself, for instance, playing in a group where you're thinking, I don't really know what to do here, then you have to start doing some research on it or try different things and even check in with the other musicians to see if it's working, if it's not working. And that's the way things develop in a group. And when it really is happening, it's beautiful because you can hear things change. I mean, I think a lot of people have this experience. If you're on the road and you have the chance to play night after night, it grows and it moves in different places. It gets more confident. I'm definitely hearing that with Herbie and Chick here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is, a well-worn pair of slippers now.
Right, because it's also a confidence in that sense that, that worked. So let's take it even further out tonight. Let's see if we can even take it to the next level.
Anything you want to share about, I'm going to take a wild guess that perhaps you've played Montreux.
I have.
But
Montreux it seemed when I played there much more formal in the sense that already people were saying that it had become more like a pop festival. There was a guy that ran it named Claude Nobbs, who, you would go up to his mansion and meet many musicians, but it had its own environment. I mean, it's an honor to play there. But it's one of these places that has its own history. And, so I think you definitely feel that. No, but I think a lot of these European festivals are where a lot of the American musicians really get a chance to play. I mean, it's not that there's not festivals in the United States, but I think for many musicians of many types of music, without Europe and also playing in Asia, the opportunities are limited here. And so that opportunity that exists, I mean, I know for myself that it's not just the number of places and the audiences that you have there, but it's also people that are willing to say, would you be willing to do something like this? For some musicians, they don't like that. They're like, I play the way I play, hire my group the way it is. That's what I want. But if somebody suggests like playing with another person, or they're interested in a project that might be more obscure, there seems to be more of an openness to that in Europe. So in that sense, Montreux has introduced a lot of music.
Oh, yeah. And Quincy Jones, who's
absolutely
had a huge influence there for many, many years.
That's right.
And is playing in Europe. Says the man who just stepped off the plane from the continent.
All right.
Hours ago.
Right.
Speaking of, what opportunities do our listeners have to hear you play live, or new recordings? Anything coming along you want to tell us about?
I guess the stuff I have coming up, I wrote a piece speaking about Philadelphia, which it was in honor of a civil rights leader that was assassinated in Philadelphia, named Octavius Catto in Philadelphia in 1871. And they built a statue for him outside of City Hall to honor him and the story of his life, which is pretty amazing. And there's a beautiful book about him called Tasting Freedom, which describes what it was like in Philadelphia, let's say, after the Civil War, and the schools that were founded, and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and many things. So I was asked to write a piece for the Philadelphia Orchestra with gospel choir and a singer from Philadelphia named Barbara Walker and orchestra to sort of tell that story. So we're playing, we've been playing it. I played it last year with the Boston Symphony. In 2 weeks, I'm playing it in Berlin. And, so, I've been doing stuff like that, of writing for these big groups. I wrote a piece against Trump called Agent Orange that was recorded by the Brussels Symphony with Dave Liebman and some other improvisers. So, I enjoy doing those types of writing projects, but I also play with a trio, and, I have some new recordings that I'm working on. They haven't come out, of both trio and solo piano stuff that I've done, and also some more, chamber music, but with a lot of improvisation in it. So I don't know. I'm finding myself just working in these areas that I've been working on. And, when you get the opportunity to do it, it comes out. So it works that way. But also playing with other people a lot, because I still like doing that. And I always enjoyed being in different groups just for the opportunity to taste different things and to see what's going on. So I like that too.
How do people keep up with what you're doing? Do you maintain a website?
I have a website, but I'm not so good about.
Nobody is. Everybody.
I know.
Says
What I end up doing is, I guess, when I get pressure from where I'm playing, like I just did a gig at Mesro with a trio, or other places where I'm playing, where they say put something up on Facebook.
Yes,
and then I will.
Yeah.
But I'm not like a big Facebook person, and I need to do that more because I have gigs coming up. I just don't really. Sometimes it feels a little bit too much, because especially if you're like, let's say in Switzerland,
Right.
I just did a whole series of gigs in Switzerland. But if I announce it, I mean, how many people that I know in New York are going to go to Switzerland to hear it? You know what I mean? So part of me is, but to certain people, that's not acceptable. It's like, no, do it.
Do it. Yeah.
And whatever happens. So I've been remiss, and I'm going to try to do better.
Well, let me then go ahead and say, Uri Caine, URI, last name Caine. And if you get the opportunity to hear him play in person, do not miss that chance, whatever format he's playing.
Thank you.
You are really an inspiration. And I caught that set not too long ago, the trio set. And man, it was just fantastic hearing you with those guys after.
That was fun because it was also it was with James Genus and Ben Prowski, and we used to play a lot with Dave Douglas.
Yeah,
he had his quintet, and I hadn't played so much with James in the last couple of years, but it just, it's one of those things where we immediately just fell back right into it.
Oh, all three.
It's
of you
such
guys.
a beautiful thing, that in a way we stay in touch, but even after all those years. And it's also one of those things that once we start playing again, because we've done other gigs since then, it always falls into the same, like, wow, this is so natural. And it's a beautiful feeling if you're a musician. It doesn't mean that it's always the best when it is that way. Sometimes when it's stressful or it's hard and you think that it doesn't sound good, then you hear it back and you say, wow, that sort of sounded interesting too. You can't really predict, when everything is lovey-dovey, sometimes it's not the most interesting music. I was shocked to hear, by the way, in that after a Herbie solo, the chick said, was that too sleepy? It was like, wow, that would not be the adjective that I would use, but it might have been also because of that sensitivity to the audience, thinking like they're expecting something else. So maybe Herbie ruminating that way isn't something, but wow, I would never say that because even his ruminations, rubato rumination, whatever you want to call that type of playing, beautiful harmony, beautiful touch, just the direction of it. And, again, sort of combining the blues with Debussy, combining the touches of a lot of different pianists. I don't know. I love it because it's so endless. There's so many different things that you can add to it. It's like being a chef where you add things and then one day you say, I'm tired of that. I did that. I want to try this. And so you try something else. And that's the essence. That's what keeps the music fresh.
Yeah. And also they made reference, speaking of their off-mic comments, Chick was talking about who had played previous to them on the bill. It was a similar two-piano duet between John Lewis and Hank Jones.
Right.
Two
impeccable pianists.
I'm glad you supplied the adjective because I was going to say, to let you fill in how another pianist would see that. But yeah, those guys, talk about touch. And
that whole type of piano playing, I really associate it when I first moved to New York to make the pilgrimage to Bradley's.
Oh, gosh.
Which was the piano player hang on University Place. And that, speaking about piano players, that was such a fundamental experience also because I remember the first time I went there, I saw Tommy Flanagan talking with Cecil Taylor.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that is amazing. And they were, they were enjoying talking to each other. And
well, those were two,
you would think they would be very opposite. But then John Hicks came in and then Kenny Barron came in. And you started to realize that there was sort of this fraternity, then a fraternity, should be also a sorority, but that idea of all these different musicians from different age groups and different personalities. Because Hank Jones, I remember talking to him. He told me he practiced every day.
Yeah.
He was very humble in that sense.
Oh, yeah.
He would say, you just got the feeling that when he was around the other pianist, he respected him so much that he felt that he had to practice. And then, other guys were much more flamboyant. They were like, no, I just
Tommy Flanagan never practiced.
Right.
He just
No. I used to see all of those guys play. Roland had all the piano players that would congregate in that place and sort of listen to each other and check in with each other. It was a beautiful thing as a younger person to see that and understand that, the ego part has no place here. It's really more about enjoying each other and enjoying the quirks of other people. Even if somebody feels, no, this guy's so much better. No, you have your own way. And they would support that. They were friendly to each other. They were, they wanted to hear, like, what are you doing? And so that's unlike a lot of other situations. Sometimes you find yourself as a musician which feels competitive and threatening. This was not that. This was really a love of the music. And so that's a beautiful way to play.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're hearing at Montreux, July 1979, Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock. And do you like duo or duet or?
I think they're both good.
Yeah. Okay. I like duet.
Duet is nice.
And, so, shall we jump back in there? Why
Absolutely.
not? All right. So, show's Deep Focus. I'm your host, Mitch Goldman. Uri Caine is with us, and Uri has selected this lovely, loving duet performance of, you chose the group when we found this recording to put a little sharper point on it. And, we're going to go back to Montreux, 1979. And I don't know if these guys having done anything more like this in later years. Maybe they did, but man, it was, I think seems like there was this period of a year or a year and a half, and the recording came out.
I'm not aware of it, but it's very possible that they did.
Very true. All right. Back to Montreux. It's Deep Focus on WKCR. Oh, I hate to leave you there, but that's the end of part 2. Check out part 3. The music picks up. The whole show picks up right from there. You'll hear the rest of it. I just want to give a big thank you to everybody who's been supportive of this show. And, we're taking these little tiny baby steps. There's like a handful of us that are enjoying the show and keeping it going. It makes all the difference when you give us, 5 stars or a thumbs up or a like or whatever. Most of you seem to be coming in through Apple Podcast. So that's a great place. Literally one person making a comment or 5 stars there. And all of a sudden, a few other people are listening to the show. So I don't know if it makes a difference to you. Makes a difference to me. That's my email coming in, not yours. But, and especially, there's people who've gotten behind this idea of making a little financial contribution, which is so cool. And I've been bearing that, which I'm certainly willing to do. But you telling me that you want to put something in the pot is really just says the world to me. You could do that through PayPal. And the email address here is deepfocusnow@gmail.com. deepfocusnow@gmail.com. And anything's more than welcome. There's no minimum. There's no maximum. Throw a little something in there and just be great. I mean, it's not gonna change anything that you get to hear. There's no prizes. It's just being part of the scene, baby. And we love you for it. We love anybody who's tuning in. You're part of the show. All right. So, May 26, 2025, Uri Caine on Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock. This was part 2. I'll see you over at part 3.